Hello every folks and good morning. Welcome to another Synergy of the Day. Today we talk about one that is going to be pretty much like one of your top-notch options for area control, and that is going to be the fun combination between a knight and a golem. So in this particular case, I actually forgot to take the flight ring off of our flying dragon from earlier, so we'll go ahead and pop that back onto Mr. Morpheus over here. So why exactly would you combine these two? Well, simply put, you've got two guys that are able to apply two very particular roles. And actually, if you happen to have a fairy, this also might be particularly handy. And in fact, you can almost apply a... well, actually, if you have a stinky set cleric, this would be perfect for this. But here's kind of the general shtick of what we're looking at. Morpheus here, the Iron Golem, you really can just be any type of golem. It doesn't matter. Whatever. Anyway, point being, they have area control, right? They can apply area control in a sort of V-shape. That is the whole purpose of something like a Rampart Shadow here. So we can actually go ahead and replace this Fruit of the Seraph with something like, let's say a Crystal Pumpkin, right? So you're running into a situation where you need to make sure that a huge chunk of threat is just held way over there on the other side of the map, right? These guys are usually going to be acting pretty quick. You go ahead and you give them their flight ring. They move forward. They find their location. They park themselves, and if they manage to roll Broad and Force that round, they're essentially going to be running, I think it's like 5 tiles that they're going to be disrupting units off to the side, while also being able to drop a Rampart Shadow. And the kind of hidden thing that you don't see until you start using this is that it's not just matching you as you are, it's matching you at an angle. So it's essentially using you where you are facing, meaning that you apply that whole Rampart situation in a V shape now, okay? So you've gone and, like, let's go ahead and run into this map here. This is going to be a terrible example of a map, but let's go ahead and look here. And so instead of just being, he is blocking this way, he flies forward, and, like, let's say he was right over here, right? He flies forward, he blocks this way, like he parks himself here, he goes and pops one of his MP boosting items or whatever. He goes here, he's blocking this whole direction, he drops a shadow right here, he's now blocking this whole area from being traversed. He has now bought everybody several rounds of breathing room for whatever they want to achieve, right? So that's pretty handy off by itself. But let's go ahead and combine this with the Knight and potentially any of the other support options here. So we've already got our Golem, we're going to put him over here, we're going to put Captain Elrig over here, and then we're going to go ahead and, for the sake of, you know what, why the hell not, we're just going to pretend that they're running the Stinky set. We'll go ahead and apply one of our clerics here, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to apply this guy. He's going to drop his V-shape up ahead. You can absolutely just kind of use his regular properties as they were. But now let's say there's this situation where you've already got that Rampart aura covered. That's going to be causing that delay action. It's going to be a big buffer to stop units from traveling forward. But you want to make sure that they're completely stuck, not going through there. So why would we apply something like this? Well, now we have Sanctuary. So Sanctuary is going to prevent undead units from entering that tile at all. They're going to be unable to even target that tile for the sake of movement, right? So let's say we're taking a look at something like this, and obviously this is going to depend entirely on spawns. This isn't an undead map, but there's several variants where, like, let's say there were several undead units that spawned over here or spawned over here. So now we've moved our Golem forward. He's going to be blocking this whole area. And we see that there's, let's say, a bunch of poison tiles or whatever else, but we park the Knight right next to the Golem, essentially giving the Golem Sanctuary. So now we have overlapping Rampart Aura and Sanctuary in the same location, right? At the same time, we still keep his Phalanx without sacrificing anything. We also go ahead and we keep the Golem's Gorge and Lock without sacrificing anything. And we're essentially creating a situation where, due to that overlap, undead units are just entirely stuck over there instead of trying to get around either one of them. Potentially they might land themselves in poison tiles or what have you, but that is a huge amount of block going on. Now you might say, why wouldn't you just go put Rampart Aura on the Knight instead? Simply put, the Golem already covers that same area. There's no need for that overlap, and in this case they can each run one part of it while still retaining more of their unique properties. So, for example, with the Knight here, you might have noticed I had him running the Brynhilder as well as a crossbow. Now the reason for the crossbow is applying a debuff. The reason for the sword is that free resurrection, as well as being able to apply a poison from the finisher. So he gets stopped from the crossbow finishers, he gets poison from the sword finishers. You can see how this kind of might build in here, because they're only dealing with maybe 1 or 2 units at a time. If somebody's an actual threat, stop. If somebody's actually got a big health bar, they poison. But either way, these two could hold off an entire map by themselves. Simply put, the only boost that they actually could potentially need is going to be coming from those health cards. If their own healing isn't enough, you just go ahead and have a little bit of a back row back row cleric there backing them up, because realistically, in most cases, they'll just be taking Plink anyway. Most of the time, the AI will be trying to find ways around them rather than trying to go and push their way through them. A lot of times, you'll usually find that by the time these guys have all of their cards stacked up, that the other side is finally applying all of their big AoEs and attempting to hit both of them at once, because neither one is really going to be a tempting target by themselves. But if they look at that AoE, it's like, oh, we're technically only doing 30 to each one, but it's 60 if we hit both of them. It's technically an improvement. And so they're going to keep hitting both of them. This is especially true if you, for example, replace this guy with yet another rock guy, or just apply yet another knight to this equation. This is why when I hear folks say that the white knight replaced the knight, no, it didn't, because white knights don't get phalanx. Anyway, so you see, through this combination of, again, ideally I just would probably only use 2 so that you're not using up all your deploy slots for this, but these 2 can easily hold off an entire area by themselves. Either one on their own might be able to hold them off for a little bit. These 2 together, by moving that sanctuary around, by moving those shadows around, they're able to accomplish a lot more, okay? And again, you know, clerics oftentimes have a tendency to get looked down upon, but they are more than capable of keeping stuff like this running pretty much indefinitely. I know personally I've had several maps here where this kind of combo has, again, just kept off an entire map, and I'm actually really disappointed that I screwed up the audio in that one, because that actually was a pretty solid one, but any darn ways. So if you're looking for other ways to kind of screw around with this, it definitely works pretty well with archers, depending on the map. It definitely works well with summoners and such too. Just, you know, typically speaking, I would say splashers are going to be a bit more efficient in this case, because usually this causes a lot of units to be clumped up in a single area, especially due to the fact that the Sanctuary is going to be a shorter lane there. So it means you're going to get a lot of those kind of triangular shapes that splashes love to hit, so splashers are definitely going to be good for this. If you want to give them a lot of safety, draconics are going to be pretty effective as a combination with all of this stuff. I don't know if I had them on any previous videos for this particular one yet, because I'm recording a couple dozen of them at the same time, but that's actually the whole purpose of Draconics. They're able to attack at far longer range than many of your other abilities. So for example, Draconics 2, I believe, have like 7 range or so on there naturally, and then you get your 3 from Engulf, your 5 from your Staff. Them suckers are hitting from miles away, so just something to consider. Either way, hopefully this was handy. Again, these 2 by themselves. Actually, wait, one more note on the knight, because I saw this come up in a thing the other day. There was a question over why would you ever take Rampart Aura off the knight? They wouldn't be able to block things. The only thing that they're really needed for, like the knight, is far better in a narrow blocking role. So, for example, if they're blocking one area, like let's say they're blocking a staircase and they've got their phalanx, and more often than not, I probably would just replace swords with steadfast with this guy. It just kind of depends on the situation, but more often than not, the Rampart Aura ends up getting wasted because their best role is going to be as a stairway blocker and stuff like that, just like going for those tiny choke points. If they're using something like Sanctuary, especially in POTD, you're looking at a case where they're going to be far less likely to be running into multiple units at once anyway, so the phalanx will be enough to keep them running. If they're feeling particularly spicy, they can train up their skills by just using heal on skeletons and such, and then the phalanx is going to be enough to keep them alive. They're still, running something like a crossbow for AoEs. Bear in mind that even though something like the Balder crossbow itself is fairly weak, it's still going to be significantly useful as just a light weapon to apply these skills over here with, especially Sanctus Flare with that stop effect on there. In fact, one of the questions that comes up is that I've seen come up a lot, and was like, oh, why do they nerf Dullbind? It's because stop is way more useful this time around, depending on the situation, of course. Dullbind used to be bind, and then Sanctus Flare used to be stop, and so this time around I believe Dullbind actually knocks them backward farther. I'm not really sure if it's what it is specifically. Sometimes Dullbind just will do additional damage, presumably just due to armor shenanigans or what have you. Either darn ways. That's kind of detail off by itself. But yeah, generally speaking, you don't need to take Rampart Aura off the Knight, because the Knight is better as a frontline blocker, whereas the Golem is going to be far better as an actual Rampart Aura user because they get Broadened Force. So yeah, that'll be about that. Remember, Rampart Aura is more of a force field for your team, not necessarily a thing that you're using to just keep stuff out of your front line. Well, it kind of is, it kind of isn't. Anyway, try to keep them out there is what I'm trying to say. Alright, have yourselves a good one. Later.